staggered Vancouver residents for many years, up until 2017, when the New Democrats unseated the incumbent Liberals who had been in power for quite some time on a campaign promise to remove the toll of the Port Mann Bridge. And you think they removed the toll? Well, they actually did. So there's been no toll on the Port Mann Bridge since 2017. It's a really important piece of infrastructure because Vancouver is the largest city in North America that doesn't have a highway connection to its downtown core, so congestion gets really bad. And the new bridge has 5 lanes going east direction. They broke a couple of records. It became the widest single-span bridge in the entire world, unseating a bridge that had held the record since 1932. And that was the Sydney Harbour Bridge in Sydney, Australia. However, my Australian guests often tell me that it doesn't count, because when we calculated the width of the bridge, we calculated the gap in between the carriageways of 67 meters. And if not for that gap, it wouldn't be wider than the Sydney Harbour Bridge. Had already constructed on. At this point in the journey, Canadian Pacific decided that it would be impossible to continue building the railway line on the side of the canyon that they were on, and they switched over to the opposite side. So 30 years later, when Canadian National came, they were also forced to switch at this point, causing the intersection of the two railway lines. Now, if it was impossible to build on the other side, how did Canadian National do it? Well, they had 30 years of technological advancements on their side, and they extensively used dynamite to construct their railway tracks. And we're going to see evidence of that and how difficult it was to build in the precipitous Thompson Canyon coming up very shortly. This crossing, Cisco Crossing, is named after the Sitka indigenous band that inhabits the area. The European settlers heard that word Siska, and they anglicized it into Cisco. So the bridge that we're on is the Canadian Pacific Bridge. This is a cantilever-style bridge, which means that the supports are placed along the bridge rather at either end. And the bridge on the other side of the canyon to our left, that is the Canadian National Bridge. It's a truss arch-style bridge, and it's actually the longest bridge on the entire Canadian National Line. It's 247 meters long and 67 meters above the Fraser River below. Now, we're very lucky today because there's actually a goods train going over the other bridge. It very, very rarely happens that there's two trains crossing over each other here at Cisco Crossing. And remember this morning I talked to you about directional running. We are traveling east, so we are on the Canadian Pacific Bridge. But in 2 days' time, we are going to do this trip in reverse. And we're going to pick up a different group of people in Banff and take them back to Vancouver on the train. So obviously we're going to be traveling west on that day, and there we will use the other bridge to cross at Cisco Crossing. And that's just all due to directional running. That was a great example of those rock sheds that I was just talking about that protect the railway tracks. Those tripwires that you see there, actually if rock or rubble touches any of those wires, it sends a signal to rail traffic control for Canadian National. They're based out of Edmonton, Alberta. And then they send excavation crews out to go and clear the tracks. And then you also might see pickup trucks riding along the railway tracks that have actually been fitted with railway wheels. And those actually go out and inspect the tracks for any rock or rubble that would fall onto the railway tracks. So it's pretty cool to see those pickup trucks that have been sort of retrofitted with those railway wheels. So someone asked me earlier, when are we reaching the jaws of Death Gorge? And ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to say that we have now reached that part of our journey. So this region in the Thompson River, the river narrows quite significantly, creating a series of whitewater rapids. And we're starting to see that on the left-hand side, and it's called the Jaws of Death Gorge. Whitewater rapids are graded on an international scale of 1 to 6, and the Jaws of Death Gorge here are... The fearsome of all the rapids is called the Mother-in-Law. It really is, I'm not kidding. There's also another one that looks like a frog sitting in the water called the Frog. I'll try to point that one out to you, but last week it was a little bit submerged by the high water level.
This is the city of Ashcroft. See this bald eagle on the telephone pole. There's a nest there.
Right, look how big that is. And then, oh, you can see the osprey sitting in there? Yeah. So iconic of the bighorn sheep. So California bighorn sheep are actually not natives to this region. They were introduced here in the 1950s from California because the populations there had been completely decimated by poaching. And the poaching laws are a lot stricter up here in Canada. So they brought herds of them up here to repopulate areas down there. And the herds absolutely exploded because they love eating the sagebrush here. And they've actually repopulated not only California, but Washington and Oregon as well, with the bighorn sheep from this part. Oh, there's more on the other side? Oh yeah, there's 3 more of the very top of that hill. Cheapers, you look at that side. Alright, so they do blend into the landscape very well because they have that ashy color on their body, but the way you can always tell a bighorn sheep is the white ring around their bottom. The herds actually completely separate themselves into gender, so you will only see male or female bighorn sheep together. And the way that you can tell them apart is that the females, their horns just curve slightly outwards, and the males, well, they're a bit hornier. Their horns curve all the way around in the spiral shape, and those are the ones that we're looking for. But those are really iconic looking bighorn sheep with the spiral horns. We'll see more, don't worry. We'll definitely see more along the lake shore when we get to Kamloops Lake. So the only time that the herds actually mix is during mating season, where the males will rut each other for dominance. So when I say rut, I'm talking about the rams bashing their horns against each other. And they say that the force that the bighorn sheep bash each other with is the equivalent of a motorbike going about 17 kilometers an hour. So an absolutely enormous amount of force, but their brains are actually centered in their skull differently to ours, so that's why they don't damage themselves when they're hitting each other or anything like that. And the dominant male bighorn sheep will have
bridge is coming up here on the right hand side, so it leaves from the opposite direction. You'll see it in almost the middle, and it's decorated as ospreys like decorate their nests with the wires and I think the rope. Oh, and this is one of my favorite nests here on the right hand side as well, across the river, and the old growth tree that is an eagle's nest, and there's always somebody home around this time of year as they have their young there. And it seems like the male, oh yes, there is. The male I think is right above, or that might be the two young ones. Oh, I love it. Yeah, if you can zoom in and get a nice photo of that one. Though he had made his way out to the Okanagan. Has anybody heard of our Okanagan?